We are truly in this country like an incredibly rich family that owns, we'll say metaphorically, millions of acres of land. They can't see, they can't travel to the outer reaches of their domain, but nevertheless they sit on the front porch and wait for the produce to come in from this vast holding, and when they get it all, they still want to consume about 6% more than everything that's been produced on the farm. And they have the ability to do that by simply selling off a little piece of the farm every day and every year that they can't even see. So they don't feel any poorer at the end of the day or at the end of the year, because it's still, as far as their eyesight can see, they own everything that God ever created. And they can sell that little piece, or they can mortgage it. They can send IOUs to these people that are giving them the extra goods to consume. And we are a very rich family, and we produce a whole lot and we consume a little bit more than we produce. And we trade away a little bit of the farm or put a little bit of a mortgage on every day. And the rest of the world is happy to take a little piece of our farm, a little harder to send us something so that we can consume a little bit more than we produce. It's been going on a while. It's accelerated a lot in the last few years. And more the rest of the world is owning part of us, and we are going to have to service that ownership either through interest if they took it in IOUs or in some other way. And it can go on a long time, but if it goes on a long time, the world will own a good bit of us, and our children will be paying one way or another for the fact that we got to consume more than we produced. And it could happen. You've obviously had some less interest in the rest of the world accepting dollars by the fact that the dollar's declined somewhat in value in the last few years. In other words, that the investment in us is always going to be equal to the overconsumption. I mean, it's an equation. But if people get a little less enthused about one side of the equation, it reflects itself in the pricing mechanism. And the world has demonstrated a diminishing enthusiasm for dollars in the last few years as they get flooded with them, because we send $2 billion out every day, whether we like it or not, and whether they like it or not. Now the question is, does that reach some tipping point at some point, or does some exogenous event come about that causes people to want to rush for exits? Who knows? I have a hard time thinking of any outcome from this that involves an appreciating dollar. But as Charlie will point out in just a second, there have been times when we've been surprised. Charlie?
Yeah, the counter argument is that what does it matter if the foreigners own 10% more of the United States if at that time total wealth of the United States is 30% higher than it is now?
Yeah. But back in the late 18th century, obviously, the idea of taxation without representation caused a certain amount of trouble, and ownership of the rest of the world by the rest of the world of this country would be seen as a form of taxation, I think, 20 years from now by the people who resided here. If instead of fighting the Revolutionary War, we'd simply made a deal with England and said, we'll give you 3% or 5% of our national product forever, and you let us be free, and we'll just send the royalty over every day. That might have looked like a good alternative to war, in 1776. But I don't think that subsequent generations would have reacted well. I mean, something would have happened over time, and I have a feeling that the idea of America paying tribute to the rest of the world because of the overconsumption patterns of a previous generation seems to be, I don't think that's a particularly stable scenario.